everybody, it's Jenny.
And this is Alexa.
And we're back with another edition of Checked Out. Joining us for today's edition are Brian and Ellen. Brian's a librarian here at the Northside branch of the Lexington Public Library, and Ellen is one of our library assistants. Welcome, guys.
Hey.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So today, because it is February, we are talking romance. And this is going to be a really fun one because Alexa is a romance reader, and the rest of us are, to borrow Ellen's phrase, tourists to the genre this month.
You guys are in for a treat.
So I admit I was not a big romance, never been a big romance reader. Don't really have anything wrong with them, just not my cup of tea, as it were. Mm-hmm. So I actually tried to cheat this month and read something that wasn't a romance, but had a romance-esque vibe to it. Some romantic undertones, if you will. And that was the Lady Julia mystery series by Deanna Raybourn, in which a character, Lady Julia, husband drops dead in the first couple pages of the first book, and she is aided with the help of a private investigator in solving his what turns out to be murder. And the investigator has like this serious Rochester, like brooding vibe going on. Heathcliff.
Yes,
there should be, he should be on a moor somewhere. But anyway, they team up, they solve the crime, and then over the course of the series, their relationship evolves. And I ended up reading the entire series in about 3 days. I was totally hooked. I was totally in it to see how their relationship would play out. And I was silently cursing Brian for doing this entire challenge and having me sucked into a series that I finished in 3 days and slept little. So
You're welcome.
How many books are in the series?
I think there were like 6 or 7, and then she stopped and moved on to her other series that's getting a lot of press right now. It's Veronica Speedwell. It's like A Curious Beginning is the first one, and sort of like a female Sherlock Holmes kind of character.
Oh, dude, yeah, I think I have heard of that. So, like, Lady Julia, was it, so when was she sad when her husband died? Was it one of those things where
he was like a childhood friend, and they married because it was convenient, and she had to get married because it's the 1870s and it's England, and she's a lady of privilege. But she is sad, but she feels like, and that's another great thing about the books as they evolve, she sort of comes out of her shell and realizes how much of herself she had stuffed down to sort of fit into a mold. And now that she's a widow, she can kind of do what she wants. And her family is actually really delightful, and that's one of the other things that's so fun about the series is that she's one of 10 children in a very wealthy family. All the kids have names like Lysander and Portia, and they're all, named after, their literary figures. But they are all wacky as can be. She has one brother who's like kind of straight-laced, and the rest are just completely out there. And they're so super fun. Her sister Portia has a fun arc. You end up rooting for them and reading for them as much as you do the main characters, which is really fun.
I love that. That's really cool.
All right, Alexa, as our romance aficionado.
I was going to ask, do we want everyone else to go first? I've got a pretty long list.
All right, we'll have everybody else give their picks as well. And we should say, too, we try to keep the podcast pretty G and PG rated. We are talking romance. So that can be anywhere from, very chaste Amish fiction, where, it ends maybe with a holding of hands and a betrothal, all the way on up to 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
So this genre covers it all.
I've got a selection.
Alexa's got a list for those that are
a pretty long list.
Do you have erotic on there? Because I have actually a couple of things that I was thinking about, like talking about 50 Shades of Grey reminded me of something that's...
I've read a few. I've not read 50 Shades. I know what 50 Shades is.
Exactly.
I haven't sat down and read the series. I've read some Maya Banks, which is kind of in that same sort of vein, but I don't typically kind of steer away from it. I have read the Sleeping Beauty trilogy by Anne Rice.
That's what I was going to bring up.
That's the deep end.
It is. I was going to bring it up because it was really fascinating.
It's a weird read. If anybody's interested in just diving right in to that end of the pool, the Anne Rice, she wrote it under her pseudonym a long time ago. She actually wrote a 4th book in the series recently, within the past few years.
Ooh.
Not as good if you want to consider the first 3.
Yeah, it doesn't quite keep the pace.
Is it Sleeping Beauty, but with like an erotic twist?
Oh, it's fascinating.
Is there ever a twist? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So instead
I
of
don't want to go too far into
I will
it.
keep it PG
Because
but
again, I don't
yeah.
know how much of it you can actually discuss while keeping things PG because
it's what 50 Shades of Grey thought it was doing.
it's a thing.
It's BDSM for sure. It's a sort of a period piece. It's a retelling of Sleeping Beauty.
Loosely.
Yes,
Like literally the
literally.
first like 10 pages and then it's like woo and you go off the rails.
It's like a framework to just jump into. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
like to give you an idea of how it's been changed. Beauty is awakened by a prince instead of a kiss. It's actually her virginity being taken, and it's called Claiming of Sleeping Beauty is the first one too. And she just becomes a sort of she's owned by the prince who awakens her. So
It's problematic on a lot of levels.
it's
mean,
it's a very interesting exercise.
it was
though.
written a long time ago as
Yes.
well. And I think that Anne Rice, like, she knows what it's kind of like, I feel like she was channeling like Marquis de Sade when
Yes,
she wrote it.
very
it's
much
like,
so.
It's like Justine or like 120 Days of Sodom or something like that. I mean, it's like, when I say it's way out there, I mean it's way out there.
And
Like,
both-
she's under
yeah.
no illusions that she's doing something that's like easy for people to
yeah.
digest.
Yeah, it almost felt like it was some sort of like she had to get it out of her system or something. Like she
Yeah.
was just not that she was particularly into it, but like just to explore it.
I think so too.
Yeah, because it's not just about like women being slaves too. There are men as well. So there's a lot of sharing of different sexualities, but it's all about power and ownership. And kind of like beauty going like taking back her own ownership of her own pleasure too.
A lot
And-
of horse
Yes,
imagery.
yes, lots of
All
it.
right.
Do with that what you will.
So
Enjoy.
on that sliver of a note, I
Segue.
will also throw out there, and he'll probably kill me for admitting this on the podcast, but Outlander, which I read the first one and I was like, all right, whatever. I couldn't
long.
get through it all the way.
They look really
But
long.
my husband read it for like the Scottish history aspect of it.
Yeah.
And kept still reading it. He's on like book 5. And he was like, yeah, I just skim over all the romance stuff. Which is funny because it's like
That's
all the women I
hilarious.
know who read it, read it very much for the romance.
You
He's
skim
like,
the Scottish stuff.
whatever. I want to get to the Scottish history
That's pretty hilarious.
of it, which I think is really fun. So if you're looking for like a book club recommendation to read with your husband, or guys with your wife,
You can-
try Outlander. You'll get different things out of
I was
it.
gonna say you can fill in the blanks for each other.
Exactly, exactly.
Who's the author?
Diana Gabaldon.
Yes.
And those are huge books too. Just ahead.
They
of
are.
My husband was actually at
I've
a
heard they're-
book fair
yeah,
a couple
very
years
good.
ago. He was at a book fair right after his book came out, and she was there, but he didn't know who she was or what she wrote. And he called me and he's like, "There are all these grown people in the parking lot in kilts. What is happening?" And I was like, and I pulled up the event information. I was like, "Well, that's because this author's there. She's huge. This is the book series." He's like, "I've never heard of it. Grown-ups in kilts at a book fair. What's happening in Kentucky?"
Yeah, probably notably not Scottish.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
she's got a big following. Yeah, it's a thing. So
It makes me wonder how many sort of, not to go outside of romance too, but like how many series or books are out there where people are getting different things from it. It's like how your husband read it for the history, but it's almost like this weird duality that could happen with it. And I love that because I think romance definitely has a lot more complexities to it.
which is what I'm appreciating about
Yeah.
the genre. And my other pick, I will say, in terms of books, was The Wedding Date by Jasmine, and I'm going to butcher her last name, but I think it's Guillory. It's Guillory.
I think that's right.
And it's totally a meet cute story. There's a woman in an elevator. Alexa is her name. She works for the mayor of Oakland, I think. And she meets this doctor whose name is Drew, and they get stuck. The elevator's stuck, and he's telling her he has to go to his ex-girlfriend's wedding the next day, and he's bemoaning it. They're very flirty, and she ends up agreeing to go as his date, so he doesn't have to go by himself. The thing about the book that kind of takes it to another level is the author is Black, and the protagonist is a Black woman, and the surgeon is a white man. And so there are conversations had, like, as they're walking into the wedding, she looks at him and she says, "Am I going to be the only person of color here?" And he goes, "I don't know. I've never thought about that." And she's like, "No, it's fine. I just kind of want to know when I go into these situations." And so the author brings up stuff like that you normally, I guess, probably don't think about or find in romance novels. And I thought that gave it a really nice extra layer, more complexity to it. And also the complexity of, she's in a high-powered job, he's in a high-powered job, they live in different cities. How are they going to make this work? Who's going to make the compromise, essentially? So
Yeah.
it was a fun read.
That's good. I'm glad it had a better ending than like Get Out, the wedding edition.
Yeah,
or
no,
something
it wasn't
like
that. It wasn't that.
But it's an
That's
interesting
not
thing
what
to
you
bring up. Yeah, like just the whole, like that is, I remember listening to a podcast where a lot of African American parents think about that moment when they have to talk to their kids about recognizing, like, when do you start asking, like, am I going to be the only person of color here? Or just the fact that you have to have those conversations, and the fact that he, like most white people, wouldn't even stop to think about it for a
Right,
second.
exactly.
Because they're like, well, I'm fine with you, but
Or
it's a thing. It's always a thing.
The friend in the book who has makes some like off color, what seem like off color jokes to his his friends, but to the people in the room who are minorities, they're pretty blatantly offensive.
Ugh, yeah.
And it's as the night goes on, Drew starts to realize, like, man, this guy's a jerk. Why have I been friends with him all these years? And it's because the things that he says, you kind of just like roll your eyes and push it off. He, by the end of the night, is finally able to confront the friend and be like, you're a jerk. I don't want to be your friend anymore. You're terrible.
That's so nice.
But it's through that lens. So yeah, it was. She's a really fun author. She's got another book out too about a proposal gone wrong at a baseball game, and I can't remember the title of it, but it looked really cute.
That one's gotten a lot of like attention.
It had.
Yeah.
Reese Witherspoon just picked it for her book club.
That's what it is.
So
I was
it's
gonna
The
put it
Catch,
on.
maybe, something like that. But anyway, she's really fun, and I highly recommend her if you're looking to read. One of my goals for the year is to read more authors of color, and she's a great one to get into if you just want something that's really fun.
Dude. Yeah, I was realizing when I was coming here that I only read one of the books that I meant to, and that my list was actually very white. And also, I was thinking about more like queer love stories. Like I've actually was looking at, have you guys seen, well, it's based on a graphic novel, but Blue is the Warmest Color. It's a really interesting movie because of just some of the, like, the way they handled, like, the love scenes and that, too. And I actually found, because I didn't know it was based on a graphic novel until I was a page at Central, just going through the story, because it's like the main character is, I think they're both in their teens, and the main girl is with a man to begin, like a boy to begin with, and then I think the other girl who has the blue hair, which is like the only color in the entire thing too, which is cool. But it's like their sort of relationship, I think, might be the only time that she has that with just a woman in particular. And I've always loved that kind of, because I feel like in romance a lot of times it's either like it's assumed straight, or there's a really big deal made that it's queer or it's gay. And I like that sort of, it could go either, it's the person, not really necessarily the orientation.
Right, it's the story itself, the relationship, not the gender.
Because as someone who, like, I identify as heterosexual, but it's like, I've always been really, really fascinated by getting that portrayal in media or in books of somebody who, like, maybe bisexual is the term, but, like, just the idea of just loving the person instead of just being like, well, I identify as this, so I have to go this route. And it was just a really interesting, I just had thought of it on the way in, because I feel like I didn't explore too much when it came to romance. I stuck more with just...
What else did you read this month?
Actually, I'm reading right now, it could fall into romance. It's a graphic novelization of a series, like some of the knights from 1001, the Scheherazade. Yeah, they're just doing one about like the Serpent Queen, and it's just like this really gorgeous visual, and it's got these two bookmarks of like she's telling the story, and they're just kind of like lovers in bed, and they keep going back and forth, being like, and then this many days have passed. It's just sort of reminding, like, I don't know, like the sort of special space of like pillow talk kind of stuff, where it's not sexy at all, and it's not like anyone's really getting together, but I just love the idea of like the stories we tell, like in that sort of intimate moment. I mean, I know Scheherazade's literally telling it to stay alive, but sure. But just thinking about it today, I was thinking about that. And also, I can't recommend enough, and it's not a true romance, but I loved how they handled love and relationships in Circe by Madeline Miller. Oh God, because it's like they talk about just godhood and how time doesn't matter to gods, and how they see like gods and titans when they see creatures that are sort of lesser, like humans or even demigods, how like they're more, it's like more amused. Like Circe has a relationship with Mercury, and the only reason it really exists is because they both just find each other interesting. It's not really any love, but
for those unfamiliar, Circe by Madeline Miller is a book about well, it's told from the perspective of Circe, the otherwise known as the witch in the
witch,
Odyssey,
yes.
who's on the island and turns the sailors into pigs and all of that.
She also wrote Song of Achilles.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, delightful.
Oh, Song of Achilles is beautiful too.
Probably more of a hard romance than
Definitely.
Circe. It's really, really nice.
Yeah,
It's a good
but I really liked, because I loved both of them, but for some reason I really loved how, because Circe has relationships with gods, men, and I think also creates, no, I think it's just gods and men, and just sort of how she traverses back and forth in that, which is a really interesting way to look at how, when you live forever, what is meaningful in a relationship, or yeah, just kind of immortality, because that's something that honestly freaks me out a lot. It's
Sure.
terrifying. But yeah.
Sure.
That's fair.
It's like that weird, what's the vampire movie with the vampires? and they're all-
Interview with a vampire.
No. There's another one. And they're in different. They live forever and they're immortal.
Oh! Is it Only Lovers Left Alive?
Yes, it is. Yes.
That's
Yeah,
a
again.
beautiful movie.
I can't
Yeah,
remember the full
creepy.
title.
All
Those
creepy.
people,
Super
oh
creepy.
man, those are like the original hipsters too.
Yes, they
like,
are.
They're so jaded and just
Yes.
sort of like, and like, he has so many music, like, he has so many instruments, and they just like, I love that they don't live together and they Skype. Like, that was a fascinating love story.
Vampire Skype. Who knew?
I know, right?
All right, my the one I'm really looking forward to getting to is Brian's
Because he's been ominously quiet.
he's been ominously
Right?
quiet,
I
and
know.
because he read one of my all-time favorites as a high schooler. I don't know how I'd feel about it now. I haven't read it as an adult, but in high school, I loved me some Jane Eyre. So Brian, let's get your take on.
Ooh, I don't
Jane
think I knew
Eyre.
you read that.
Jane Eyre's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. Well,
Is this your first time through it?
yeah, it is.
Cool.
It is.
Okay.
He's having the experience of every 15-year-old girl in America.
Give the
Exactly
report to
right.
the class.
Right?
I know.
And I'm having feelings of swellings and swelling emotions.
Yes, you're-
No, it was a fantastic book. It
Yeah.
was amazing. I think probably it's the fact that it came out in 1847. It has a lot to do with the themes that are in there. The themes of how,
Just a tiny bit gothic.
yeah, exactly, and
Right.
how they approach the subject of marriage and is approached. But you and I were talking about it the other day, Jenny, and you talked about Jane being kind of a proto-feminist
Yeah.
character, and I think she was. I think she was, and so where there are all kinds of issues in there about having money and stature. Well, that was very much part of the culture that of the English culture at the time. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. In fact, I listened to it on a CD. So
Oh, who read it?
Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. Sometimes it's like famous actors.
No,
Right.
I
Those are
didn't
good
recognize
ones.
the person's name. But yeah, it was nice. It was kind of a slow boat through the book.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so like lovely and atmospheric. The movie adaptation with Michael Fassbender
Mm-hmm.
is really beautiful, really really beautiful. So if you like the book, the movie is just wonderful. It's just like. I think I remember reading an article after it came out where, when possible, they lit almost the entire thing just like with candlelight.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's just like it's so moody and nice and.
Who's
Like
Jane
an
in
oil
that one?
painting. Mia Wasilowski.
I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
say
yeah.
her
Polish last
name.
Yeah, yeah, that's
So-
right.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
She's Alice in the
so.
weird Johnny Depp Alice movies.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, if you are a fan of Jane Eyre and you want a completely different take on it, Wide Sargasso Sea,
Yes.
which is about Mr. Rochester's marriage from the point of view of his wife, Antoinette Causeway, a Creole heiress.
It's really good.
So it is very good. It is
Fascinating book.
very different. But if you're sort of like, man, I wish there was some more backstory
So
to
wait,
this
that
wife in
l-
the attic.
That
Yeah.
literally takes
The
the
wife
point
in
of
the
view
attic.
of Bertha.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know, I didn't realize
It's
that.
I
by-
read that in my women's lit class in
It's
college.
by
Wide
Jean
Sargasso
Rhys,
Sea.
R-H-Y-S.
Well, this is so interesting that you all should mention this, because I was talking about this with another one of the employees here last night, who, when she found out I was reading the book, she was very excited because she loves the book. And as we were talking about it, she asked me who my favorite characters and all this were, and she said that she loved Bertha, who we get very, very little.
No,
of
she's
her,
just kind of a
her-
ghost, and
right,
then yeah,
her
and
point
then
of
she's-
view,
yeah.
or she's more like a force of nature that kind of whips through that book.
Yeah, it's just an emotion.
You should definitely read White Sargasso Sea.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
really, really good.
Well, I have a couple more slots to fill for the end of the month. One of the things about this that I'm trying to do this month, one of our other friends here at the library, Becca, had sort of brought to my attention that how much there is out there to read and how little of it I was getting to. Not to call myself out on the podcast, but it's true.
I think most people are probably guilty of that.
Sure, exactly,
Sure.
exactly.
Who
So,
can't be?
so that's part of why I wanted to do this reading challenge this year. Is I'm trying to read 4 books out of every genre that we do each month. So I've got some slots to fill too. I might get Wide Sargasso Sea in there.
It's a good one.
I would also put in a plug if you are going to go back and read Jane Eyre because you never read it in high school and you want to try out some Austen. Skip the Pride and Prejudice.
Okay.
It's a fine book, but it is the one that everyone goes to. And read Emma.
Emma's delightful.
So many people don't like Emma. They find her to be shallow, and I don't find that at all. I think she means well. She's just a little immature.
It was Jane Austen's favorite.
Yeah, it's my favorite of all the Austens. And there's also a miniseries version with Romola Garai
Garai.
as Emma, which is lovely. And Michael Gambon is her dad, and he is the best
Also watch Clueless.
ever.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
Clueless.
Clueless is actually a fantastic modern retelling of Emma.
It's wonderful. We watched. I took a Jane Austen class in college because, as
Awesome.
one does, and we watched Clueless in my Jane Austen class because my professor, who was an expert in Jane Austen, believed that it was one of the best adaptations
There is
of all Jane
actually
Austen
a
books.
really there's a span of about 10 to 15 years where like in teen pop culture there were movies made that were like 10 Things I Hate About You
The
is
Light
actually
Taming
of the
a
Shrew?
pretty fantastic Taming of the Shrew.
It is. It's really, really good.
Yeah, it was
There was,
always
like there was a
Shakespeare.
span where that was a thing and it was
Yeah,
really
even
great.
in-
Most of
Animated
them had
movies.
Julia Stiles in them.
Yes.
True.
She's also in O,
That's right.
and she was in Hamlet.
yes, she was not in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet though,
That's true.
which I still enjoy.
She would have been a really good Juliet.
Yeah, I actually
In lieu
don't
of Claire Danes.
I find the rest of the cast really fantastic. Romeo and Juliet sort of annoy me in that, like at 15,
I think they're meant
they
to.
were cool, but like as an adult, I'm like, just grow up.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's
Yeah.
pretty typical.
So it is what it is.
Is that one where they literally like fight with guns or something?
Yes.
It's like they're called like the gun is called a saber.
yes.
Yeah, the guns
Great.
have like sword written on the side of them.
It's
and
great.
stuff.
Very
Oh,
Baz
Baz
Luhrmann.
Luhrmann.
Yeah.
Oh,
Very Baz
Baz.
Luhrmann. It's very like if you have any kind of epilepsy
Yeah, don't.
disorder,
Yeah.
it's not something that's easy to watch.
Yeah, I had a
It's-
cousin that walked out of Moulin Rouge for that same thing. Not that she has
Yeah.
epilepsy, but because she was like, "This is a migraine.
It's too
Yeah.
much.
waiting to
It's
happen."
a visual
But I love that.
statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's impressive.
Brian, what else did you read this month?
Yeah.
So I also read, and I feel like we're all going to talk about this. My Lady's Choosing.
Mm-hmm. I'm
Yeah.
ready to talk about My Lady's
I'm-
Choosing.
Okay,
I'm
so-
interested to hear what everyone did.
Yeah,
Let's
so
let's save that one for the end because
Okay.
it's one that you all read, and let's do our individual picks, and then we'll go to the one because this month we all tried to read the same book, and that was My Lady's Choosing,
Yes.
which is sort of a choose your own adventure for romance.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So, Alexa, let's delve into yours because
Okay.
you've got a whole list.
I do.
and you're the expert here.
So I've been reading romance novels for a really, really long time. I read probably my first few. I started with Danielle Steele and V.C. Andrews when I was like too young for Danielle Steele and V.C. Andrews. Like
That's the best way to start
7,
it.
8, somewhere around there. So I've been reading romance.
That's a big book for a 7 or an 8-year-old.
I understand.
I was left unattended a lot.
Yes,
And
right.
yeah, you know, I mean, there's books laying around in grandparents' houses. You pick them up. Next
Right.
thing you know, you're
That's why I encountered
reading
Daniel
Flowers in
Steele
the
too.
Attic.
Right.
Yeah.
Left the power tools alone. Not right for the book.
I read small tangent. I read Carrie at school during the day in the 4th grade because my mother wouldn't let me read it at home.
I did that too with books.
Yeah.
I would just take them to school and read
You
them.
do what you have to do if you want to read something.
Right.
So I was gonna get hold of it one way or another. But yeah, so I read romance for a
Listen
really
here,
long
parents,
time.
don't censor your kids because they're just gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, it's just talk about it afterwards.
You didn't want to let me read
Yeah.
Carrie? I'll read it at school in my math book.
Exactly.
You're welcome, Mom.
Maybe that's why you're not very good at math.
I'm terrible at math, but you know what? I'm a librarian. So
Exactly.
It's fine. I don't have to be good at math. I have a calculator.
It's sort of a take on the famous anti-drug commercial. As she finds the book in the backpack. What is this?
I learned it from watching you.
I learned it from watching you, Mom.
That's me. So yeah, I do have a pretty big list. These are all kind of recent reads for me. I tried to kind of span the gamut. I will say I tend to gravitate towards Regency romances. So I like the dukes and the earls and all that fun stuff. That's where I feel most comfortable. I've read a lot of different kinds. I tend to kind of shy away from contemporary stuff unless I see something that is getting a lot of good press. I did read The Kiss Quotient last year, which is a delightful book.
It's Reverse Pretty Woman, right?
Reverse Pretty Woman, exactly.
Interesting.
That is the premise. The protagonist of that book is an autistic Asian American woman, and her mom is always just getting on her case about having a boyfriend and getting married, and you're so pretty, and you have this great job, and why can't you find a husband?
She's like she's a math researcher.
She's
right?
like a mathematician, or an economist or something like that. It's delightful. Highly
write that
recommend.
down.
It's really, really wonderful. And so her mom's always on her case. She's like, well, I'm going to just fix this. So she hires a male escort to teach her how to get a boyfriend, basically. And they end up falling in love, obviously. And it's wonderful. It's such a good book. I believe it's been optioned to become a movie now, which I'm super excited about.
But no Richard Gere. Just heads up.
It's really, really good. Highly recommend that. As far as my favorite Regencies, I will say I'm a huge Tessa Dare fan. I have read every single book that Tessa Dare has ever written. They're wonderful. I think that everybody should read them. My favorite series that she has done is called Spindle Cove. And the first book in that series is called A Night to Surrender. So Spindle Cove is basically all of the stories in that book series are set in a place called Spindle Cove. And the locals call it Spinster Cove because it's a place where, like, bookish blue stockings, as they're called in Regency romances, bookish women who don't have a great time finding husbands can go on, like, a little retreat. And they, like, live by the sea and they learn how to shoot guns because it's run by a lady whose father creates weapons for the war.
Dude,
Delightful.
It's like I thought it was gonna be shady, but it got so much better.
No,
that's so cool.
Tessa Dare's great.
Yeah.
She puts Hamilton references in her romance
Oh,
novels.
wow.
She's really, really good. Highly recommend. Spindle Cove is a great series by Tessa Dare. It's got a lot of books in it, and it actually ends up overlapping with her other series called Castles Ever After. The last book in Spindle Cove is like book 3 or 4, I think, in Castles Ever After series. Really delightful. She has a new series that she just recently started. The newest book in that one came out in August, and it's great. It's called, or is it on my list? Girl Meets Duke is the title of her new series. The first book in that is The Duchess Deal, and it's kind of a Beauty and the Beast-esque story. It's really, really funny. And then another series that is great, another Regency that I love is the Rules of Scoundrel series by Sarah McLean. That's a really good one. It's just a 4-book series, so it's not quite the like endeavor that going through all of the Spindle Cove books is. And it's about 4 partners who run a gaming hell, is what they call gaming halls. I don't know why they're called that. I'm sure that there is some etymological reason why they call them gaming hells. And then obviously they all find ladies in all of the books, which is really fun. You get to watch these super cool guys who run their super cool gaming hells just like slowly just succumb to marriage, and it's really funny. Some good YA romance, because I think that there's a lot of really good YA romance out there. One that I read last year as well, The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. That is also a period piece, and it is you're talking about wanting to read more books with queer protagonists. It is an LGBT book. The main character, Henry Montague, convinces his parents to let him go on like this tour across England before he gets shipped off to boarding school with his best friend, and like basically been raised together, and he's in love with his best friend.
Yeah.
And they go on this cross-country trip with him and his little sister who tags along, and it's very delightful. And it's really tropey. Like, if you like romance tropes, like forced proximity and you have to be together, like there's only one bed at the inn, and that sort of like hilarious misunderstanding and circumstance. Tons of it to be had in that. Really, really fun. And then what else do I have? I talked about the Kiss Quotient. Another really good author that I want to give a shout out to is Kat Sebastian. We've started getting a lot of her books here at the library, and she does write gay romance as well. She has some really sweet ones. The one that I read by her recently was called It Takes Two to Tumble.
So are these historical or?
The Cat Sebastian ones are, yes. They are Regencies.
Because here's my thing, right? Like, how much of a happy ending can they really have in Regency? Because they're eventually, like, their parents are going to pressure them to marry some hapless heir to keep the dukedom in the family or something, right? Like, this is not
So,
going to be a...
I don't want to spoil the ending of Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. I will say the author of that found a delightful way around it.
Okay.
Nice.
Really, really cute ending. And I think it's believable within the time period. I don't want to say it because it's really good. You should read it. And I will say, Cat Sebastian, I've only read a couple of her books. It Takes Two to Tumble. I also thought came to a pretty believable conclusion because I felt the same way when I started reading them. It's just like, it's historical, like, how really, but I mean, like, there are all kinds of historical precedent of just like, well, he's a bachelor and he lives with his best buddy, aren't they wacky? And everyone's just fine with it. And like, nobody, like, there's a lot of historical precedent for that. And it kind of tends to work out, you know. The author finds a way, basically.
What time period is it, too, ish? Like, the Cat Sebastian one in particular? Actually the other one, too,
the one that I read, Regency kind of era, and that's
because,
typically
like,
what I read.
in one of my, like, gender studies classes, we actually talked about how a lot of times, like, we're talking about, well, I don't know, who, in It Takes Two to Tumble, is it 2 men or 2 women?
2 men.
Yeah, and, about how, like, men, like, what you were saying, how men were, like, allowed, it's like they had 2 separate spheres. Like, men had their sphere, and whatever went on in there was kind of whatever.
Yeah.
And, like, the same thing, too, with women, where it's, like, in the sort of Victorian era, like, and beyond, even up until the 20s, like, there wasn't really a word for lesbianism. Like, lesbos kind of came out and all of that, but, like, they didn't really think about how women could have sort of a sexual identity outside of it, because it was such a men's world kind of thing. And it's like you got married and then you still stayed in your separate spheres.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting look, because, like, historically we always think of, especially the Victorian era, as being very uptight, but actually not that they had a lot of, it wasn't really loosey-goosey, but, like, they just had a lot of different rules and didn't think about things the way we do.
Yeah.
So things just kind of went.
Yeah. I think that's kind of how the authors are able to kind of get away with the happy endings in these cases, because, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, well, that's going to work out great, and
Right.
But I mean, realistically, like, yeah, it did.
Yeah,
for
people
a lot
were
of,
happy then.
for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, you just kind of played by the rules, but you found the loopholes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's really cool.
A couple more. 2 more, and then I'll stop. Just another kind of historical one, Forbidden by Beverly Jenkins, which is the first book in her Old West series. And it's really interesting. Beverly Jenkins is an African-American author, and this is about a Black woman who comes to be the new school teacher in this town. And there is a man there who she falls in love with, and it turns out that he is actually a Black man who is able to pass as a white man. So there's a lot of discussion of, like, racial politics and stuff like that in context of the Old West. Like, they're literally, like, out in the middle of nowhere, and it's like he's really got really high standing in this town, and he owns all these buildings, and he wouldn't be allowed to own his property if people knew that he was actually a Black man.
Yeah.
And it's really, really good. Beverly Jenkins is a wonderful writer. And it's very, like, if you're not into, like, the more, like, hot and heavy stuff, if you're not ready to jump in with Anne Rice's Sleeping Beauty series, I will say Beverly Jenkins is more on the chase side of things. It's very tame as far as romance novels go. And then another one that I really loved that I read recently, we were talking about Shakespearean adaptions, was Vinegar Girl. By Ann Tyler.
Oh, I saw that.
It's really lovely. It's part of a series that is just having authors do interpretations of Shakespeare plays. And so this is Ann Tyler's adaptation of Taming of the Shrew. And it's a really, really good one. It's super cute. It's set in present day. And it's fun. I mean, it's not as silly as 10 Things I Hate About You, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Probably watched it.
Because it's got Heath Ledger dancing and singing.
Heath Ledger is just in his prime. Just
yeah,
so good.
He was.
So good.
And the often underrated Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
True.
He's such a baby.
He's a baby in that movie.
Yeah.
Gabriella Union's a baby. There are a lot of babies.
Yeah, there's a lot of babies.
It's really good. So yeah, that's my abbreviated list of some recent romance that I've read that I think covers a pretty wide range of topics. I don't typically read a lot of the inspirational Amish romance. I have read some just to see what it is. I've read some Beverly Lewis. But yeah, I think that even if you don't want to jump right in, like pick up an Avon or one of the Little White Harlequins, I mean, it's like you said, there's plenty of books out there that have romantic themes and undertones. And I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find something that didn't have any romance in it.
Sure.
I mean, like it exists, but
Right?
You know, one book that I was going to mention earlier, and this is for later on in the month for me. I'm going back to this one. When I started this, I thought haven't read any romance novels. I had no grounding in it at all, and I realized that wasn't true. And so I'm going to go back and reread Love in the Time of Cholera.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Gabriel
If you
Garcia
haven't
Marquez.
read, just pick up one of his books and read them because it's pure poetry.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
And it's a book that has men who are trying to get into who want to try out a romance novel. It might have a little bit more. It might have a little bit more of a masculine energy. I don't know if is that
I know what you're
safe to
saying.
say?
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
safe to say.
I get what you're saying, and I mean,
Yeah.
I think it probably helps that it's written by a man.
And that is true. Yeah,
And so he brings a different perspective to
Right.
it than a lot of hard romance novels.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's do our non-book recs, our other media recommendations, and then we'll do our dive into
My Lady's Choosing.
My Lady's Choosing. So, all right, favorite romantic. We'll do three things. We'll name movie, we'll name favorite couple, and third of your choosing, which is not a book. So, favorite romantic movie, favorite romantic couple, TV or film, and then third of your choice.
Okay.
Ellen, you want to
I'll
start?
start it. Yeah, sure. So, like, movie-wise, I immediately thought of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind because I think it's Michel Gondry is the director and writer. No, Kaufman wrote it. Charlie Kaufman wrote it, I believe. I think. I can't remember.
Gondry definitely directed it.
He definitely directed
Yeah.
it. I just know because, like, Charlie Kaufman does such interesting sort of, like, self-aware, like, almost horrifically self-aware kind of stuff. But I just really liked how it really introduced me to a non-linear sort of look at a relationship and how, I don't know, like things don't work out, but you're still willing to sort of try, and how people are brought back together even if it's not like the healthiest thing, or even just sort of like going through a breakup, and how everyone just kind of wishes that you could just forget, especially when you're hurting, and how that's actually not really a good thing because it has to be part of the process. And we were talking about how Elijah Wood's just kind of creepy in it too.
Great.
Which is his strong suit. It really is, man. But yeah, it's a really surreal movie that has a lot of very real feelings in it. So it's not just out there like it's not gonna make you feel great, but it's gonna make you think a lot about like your last breakup, or not in a bad way, but like or even just future relationships, like how you can sort of like handle it, and I don't know, just sort of like thinking about the healing process.
Okay, favorite couple.
Favorite couple? Oh, that's hard. I don't really.
First one that comes to mind.
I know. The first thing that came to mind was like, freaking A. No, it's gone now.
Marge and Homer Simpson.
That's not too bad. Actually, no.
That was pretty good.
Peggy Hill and Hank Hill.
Yeah.
That's another good one.
Yeah, I've
Peggy's
only,
self-esteem is through the roof, and I
Yes,
love
well,
that
I've
about her.
only just started watching King of the Hill. Yeah, and like I love that you get to see this sort of cross section of conservative middle America, and their relationship is like they just have like moments of like they've got each other's backs, and they're not like overly affectionate, but they're partners, and I
Yeah.
love that they're partners.
Yeah.
And even if I'm not like on their ideological scale, like I just love seeing their life, and I don't know, man. It's like it's a marriage that I'm not sad by.
I still call spaghetti, if I make spaghetti for dinner, I call it, even though there are no meatballs, I call it spapeggian meatballs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Spaghetti meatballs.
Spapeggian meatballs.
She made me want to play Boggle so bad, too.
Right? Peggy Hill is so underrated as an icon, I feel like, for women, because it's mostly because her self-esteem is so high.
I don't think there's ever been a more confident character.
Yeah,
ever written.
and a lot of people kind of, I think, get annoyed with her for that. I'm like, but why? She loves herself, and why shouldn't she?
Yeah. Why not?
She fell out of a plane.
Yeah, and survived.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Because she's
With-
a
is
She
that-
learned to walk
acrobatic.
again.
Broke every bone in her body.
Everything. Yeah, and she like rocks
That's
the baby.
right. I
Naruto. No, man, she's a freaking hero. Thank you for pushing me
Yeah.
so I could remember the hills.
What was the third one you were supposed to do?
Anything?
Your choice.
Okay, so the first thing I thought about was music. There's a concept album by the Decemberists called
Hazards of Love.
Crane Life is great, but The Hazards of Love is what I thought about. Just because it is such an immensely thought out story with like actual parts
Beautiful.
that are singing, and it's
I
really
saw them live when that
beautiful.
came out, and
Me
they did the whole first half of their show was just that album beginning to end, because it's kind of a rock opera.
Yeah.
Except right before they jumped into one of them, the lead singer goes, "All right, now we're gonna sing a song about infanticide."
Yeah.
And then they jumped. It's like, all right then, and they went into the Rake song.
The Rake songs.
Yeah.
The Rake songs
Hazards
are
of
good.
Love is a really fun album.
It's
Yeah.
wonderful. Decemberists are great.
They
It's just
are.
they're storytellers.
Yeah.
Like that's what I really love is that they're not afraid to go deep diving into.
They're good friends with Michael Schur, who's done The Good Place and Parks and Rec, which I feel like explains a lot about The Good Place and Parks and Rec. Just
I think so too.
as a heads up.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are mine.
Brian?
Brian.
Going around the
Rom-com.
circle.
Okay, so my
Are you to Google? Or you can like
Googling
Google
romantic
love
comedies?
story.
I,
Sorry.
so my
Brian's dead inside. It's fine.
no, my movie's going to be What Dreams May Come.
Yeah, you.
Beautiful.
Yes, it's a beautiful,
Oh, so good.
beautiful film. The story was written by Richard Matheson, the great author of Stir of Echoes and what was his big one? It was Omega Man, and then it became
It is a dramatic role for Robin Williams.
Yes,
So don't let
exactly.
Robin Williams on the cover make you go.
Oh no, yeah.
Think it's a comedy, because it's not. It's very sad that Robin Williams is a character, lovely wife. Some horrible things happen to them, and she ends up committing suicide and going to hell, and he travels through hell to get her back.
yeah. So it's a fantastic journey into the underworld. It's,
Yeah,
it's
it's
an amazing
beautiful.
thing.
It's like it's not religious.
Yeah,
But it is.
right. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not to like take your spot.
Not a bit. Not a
Cool.
bit.
I just have a lot of feelings about that movie.
Yeah, that's sort
Having
of what
watched it, so
and that's,
like
that's sort
yeah.
of what I got.
Right? And it just I don't know, man. And like their love is interesting too, because it's like they're both have gone through so much pain.
It's how they
There's
handle
so
it differently.
much pain
yeah.
and how they handle it differently. And just the power of wanting to I don't know, like be someone else. Like it always really breaks my heart when you find out who, and I won't spoil it, but like who's who, like who the different
so
characters
the
are
idea is
revealed
that
as.
in heaven you create your own heaven, and so Robin Williams is in his heaven, and he's talking to a character and finds out it's actually someone he knew very, very closely on Earth, and she then explains to him why she's taken this form in heaven. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and just visually it's beautiful
Yeah,
too.
it's
It's like an oil
it's
painting.
stunning.
And yeah, it's a really interesting pick for a romance too.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
what made you pick it?
It was a movie that that Naomi and I watched. It came out not long after she and I started dating, and I think
Yeah.
it was and
Tell me that was your first date.
no, right, and everyone here.
Dark first date. I'll
No,
just
no,
Right?
say.
no.
Like if you
But-
die, I will follow
Right.
you. Yeah.
So everyone here in the room knows that's my wife.
Yeah. Fellow LPL
So,
librarian.
fellow, exactly, and so it has a close place in my heart for that reason.
Okay, favorite couple.
This is so terrible. I cannot think of one.
See, I was the same way.
And
It's
then
like,
as soon
I
as
know
you
there's
said,
a million
as,
things
as
to
soon
talk
as you
about.
said Hank and Peggy Hill, I thought, well, that's exactly who.
Homer and Marge Simpson.
Bob and Linda from Bob's Burgers.
That is really good. Have you ever watched Bob's Burgers?
I have.
Okay.
And they are good.
They are good.
Yeah.
It's fun how
I'm just
much...
thinking of animated ones
Right,
now.
I know. It's
Right?
like it's fun to think of how many animated ones.
Fry and
really...
Leela from Futurama.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Shredder and Michelangelo.
dude, chips. Oh man.
No, I can't. I
right.
cannot think of
What about
a
those
single
two
one.
people from One Direction? William and what's
Brian's
his
choice
face?
then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, another book that this is a book. that I would
Breaking the
encourage
rules, but
people
I'll allow it. Go ahead.
is it's a novel by Julio Cortázar called Hopscotch. Hopscotch came out, I believe, in the 1950s. It was his biggest novel. It was an enormous hit, and the centerpiece is it tells a story of a character who's in love with a young woman, and they're having a romance in Paris. But there's all kinds of more layers to it. And the reason it comes to mind is because as we're getting ready to talk about My Lady's Choosing, this was a book that when it was written, Cortázar encouraged people to read it straight through, and then to mix and match, and try and find different ways to read it. So you can read it straight through, or you can read a different order of chapters that he has at the beginning of the book.
That's cool.
That's really cool.
That he recommends, yeah.
Wow.
So to make it a different book.
Yeah.
I like that you can rearrange it. That's a
Yep.
really nice way to approach, I don't know, just storytelling. Kind of
Right.
like in Eternal Sunshine. It's like, it doesn't necessarily have to be linear or,
Right.
yeah.
But right at the
Sweet
center of it
perspectives.
is this love story, and Cortázar is one of the greatest novelists of all time in terms of being able to lay it out beautifully in language in a way that I didn't do right there.
Is it Spanish? Spanish, Portuguese, or?
He was originally written in Spanish. He's from Argentina.
I love how, I love thinking about translations too.
Right.
Of that kind of, just how, I don't know, like some things you just can't translate, but how it can translate so much to that. Like thinking about, well, one, I just connected why it's called Hopscotch.
Yes.
That was great.
Right.
And two, just like, I don't know, just the whole, it'd be interesting to be a translator specifically for romance, because there are so many things that like may not translate just or just how, like, I don't know, how different kind, like I think a lot about how like Asian writers are translated, because sometimes like dating culture or romance is thought of so differently, and it's like, how do you appeal to like a Western audience? Like I think a lot about, has anyone read Banana Yoshimoto, anything by her? She has a lot of odd characters that are kind of reminding me of the Kiss Quotient, where they're just odd women, and mostly women, and just how romance is sort of like a second thing. It's like they see little things in how people interact, and that's kind of what you look at. So they're not straight up romances, but it's like, it feels like a very sort of like particularly Japanese way of looking at how, like, partnership and all of that stuff too. And a lot of like being a single woman, like how that's looked at as well too. It's interesting.
Okay, my pick. You had that very dark dive into, or very deep dive into something else, and I'm going to be light and fluffy again. But
I know,
my
right?
pick
I was
for-
like, I
for
should
favorite
stop.
couple
Okay,
is
yeah.
Pam and Jim from The Office.
Classic.
I think they're really well fleshed out over the course of the series, and sort of all of the layers of marriage and relationships. And a friend texted me this morning, just said, Pam hugged Jim back, and now I'm sobbing. And I knew exactly what she meant. It's a show that you can watch 1,000 times over and over and over again, and see something new each time. And, you know, of course, they have the sweet, you know, will they or won't they, and then they're together as a couple, and then it's them as a married couple and as parents, and challenges of being, you know, two working parents, and it's so real. And I really appreciate that, but it never loses the sweetness. So Jim and Pam all the way. Jam, if you will, if you're Kevin Malone, PB&J. My pick for movies, I'm actually going to pick two. One is super light and fluffy, and that's 2 Weeks Notice, an underappreciated Sandra Bullock, Hugh Grant film, which I love. And my other one is Dead Again, which is Emma Thompson and Kenneth Branagh. It's back when they were married, before Kenneth Branagh was a terrible person and cheated on Emma Thompson. Who cheats on Emma Thompson, you guys?
Right.
Anyway, that's a tangent for another day. They are a couple, and flashes back in time between the 1940s and modern era, which is like the 90s. And one's a private detective trying to help this woman figure out who she is, and they flash back, and there's a murder, and it's a little bit campy in a fun way. It's just really well done, and because it's, you know, Emma Thompson and Kenneth Branagh, and no Helena Bonham Carter to be found, so. It's great.
What's that? What's that a thing about?
That's who he cheated
That's who he
on.
cheated
Emma
on.
Thompson.
Emma
That's who it
Thompson
was? Oh, I
with
didn't
Helena
know
Bonham
that.
Carter. Yeah.
That makes me sad. I
Right?
love her so much.
I have all kinds of feelings about it. We could do a whole podcast on my feelings about that
I
relationship
know.
in general.
Oh.
Jenny's pick.
It's fine. She got the hottie from Sense and Sensibility. Emma Thompson's doing just fine.
Yeah, she really is.
Yeah. That was my pick. Dead Again was my pick.
Oh, okay. You just
Yeah.
did 2 movies.
I did 2
Oh,
movies. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. My favorite romance movie is It Happened One Night.
Oh yeah.
It's real old.
I think that's like in the golden age. of
It's
movies,
Clark
right?
Gable and Claudette Colbert. It was the first movie to sweep the Oscars and win the Big Four. It won Best Director, Best Picture, Best Actress, Best Actor. It's super cute and funny. The premise is that Claudette Colbert has married this horrible guy named King Wesley, which is the worst name in the history of the world, and her dad hates him. And so he kidnaps her and puts her on this boat and says, "You can't marry King Wesley. I'm keeping you on this boat until you agree to have the marriage annulled." And so she swims away. She jumps off the boat and swims away, and then she runs into Clark Gable, who is a disgraced newspaper reporter. And he's like, "I'll help you get back to King Wesley if you give me the exclusive story about it." And so then they set off on this amazing road trip together, and it's super cute and fun, and it's just a really delightful movie. And I think that anybody who thinks that they don't like old-timey movies in black and white should watch it, because you will change your mind. 'Cause it's
Another great
wonderful.
one, and I know I'm jumping in on yours, but another great one is the Philadelphia Story with Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart won an Oscar for it. It's the only thing he won an Oscar for, surprisingly enough. He sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow and carries Katharine Hepburn around, and Cary Grant is as charming and delightful as he ever was in anything. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. And yeah, again, like if you think, like, I don't like old movies, watch this one. It'll change your mind.
My favorite couple, Harry and Sally. From
Oh,
When Harry
yeah.
Met Sally.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that movie so. I love anything with Meg Ryan in it. I love You've Got Mail too. Joe Fox and Catherine from The Shop Around the Corner, close second. But Harry and Sally.
I just found Harry to not be that likable.
He's Rob Reiner. You can't not like Rob Reiner.
No, it's Billy Crystal.
No, I mean, I'm saying
But
Rob.
it's
Rob
Rob Reiner.
Reiner
Right.
is the character,
Right,
and Nora
sure.
Ephron is Sally, and it's
Sure.
just like it's Rob Reiner's personality being
Yeah.
performed by Billy Crystal, and I just think he's so charming. I watch that movie every year on New Year's. It's my New Year's movie, and it's just really sweet. They're so cute together. And then my pick, Mozart in the Jungle,
Oh, yeah.
from Amazon Prime. They canceled it. They have betrayed me. It's canceled now, so sorry if you want to get into Mozart in the Jungle, because the 3rd season was its last, which is devastating, because Gael Garcia Bernal, so delightful in that movie, or in that show. He's so cute, and it's really wonderful. You should watch it, even though it has been canceled, because it's wonderful.
And if you just want like a non-traditional show about love in terms of love and friendships,
Yeah.
I've been binging The Good Place lately, and I highly recommend. It's a group of misfits who end up in the good place, aka heaven, together, and Ted Danson is the architect, sort of their angel of the neighborhood, and it's just about their relationships and how they evolve, and there's a fun twist at the end of the 1st season, and it's a great show. All right, you guys, delve into my ladies' choosing.
Okay, so my lady's choosing. This is a choose your own adventure novel, and so I only chose one adventure. Did you guys do more than one, or did we all just do one?
I did.
Okay.
I think I did 5.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's my problem with choose your own adventures, is I want to know once I get started. Like I've always wanted to live many lives anyway, so this is like a way to sort of be like, cool, like I can do this with in a fairly safe space to just go back. Plus, I'll just catch it, and I know it's like I feel like I'm peeking, but I'll catch a glimpse when I go to another
the
page
other one.
of the other one, and I'm like, oh my god, they're in this thing, and then I just have to like try to go back. I just like
Right.
knowing. I didn't get all of them because I don't even know how many endings there are.
I think there's a lot.
There's a lot.
Yeah, I read a review of it, and they were talking about how you can like go to Egypt in one of them, and I was just like, I didn't go
That
to
was-
Egypt.
Oh, that was my OG story.
Was that a good one?
It was
Was
it
it
was
really?
interesting. Oh yeah, can I guess what you? I'm just really excited because like to set it up, like we had one of our coworkers, Brian, let her choose, and we were all like, she's gonna get a smutty Harlequin, like all this stuff to make him really uncomfortable, and then she actually ended up doing My Lady's Choosing, which I'd never heard of either. So I had the idea of all of us getting even more of like Northside people to read it and then talk about what they got, and I just was really interested in.
It got pretty sexy.
It gets pretty sexy.
Yeah, it does.
More than I thought.
It wasn't chaste.
No,
No,
it was
no,
not.
it was
Yeah.
not. Because I just thought it was going to be like fade to black kind of stuff.
I thought
They
it
were
was.
like,
I thought it was. We were here for the laughs. Like I didn't think
Right?
that we were really going to get into
I
stuff,
know.
but
I was
we
like,
did. Yeah.
cool. But Can I just make a guess?
Absolutely.
Just from knowing you. Okay. So, like, I think you followed the Scottish guy. And I think you didn't end up with him, though. And I bet you went to follow him, and you were like, ugh. And then like you went to like the Moors, like the like depressing guy, because it's like I think there's a point where you can go and then be like, I swear to God, if I'm right, I'm gonna be so happy.
Brian is shaking his head.
No, I'm probably insulting you somehow.
No, I went with the Scottish guy.
Nailed it.
Yeah, and that was where I ended up with.
Did you stay with him?
I
What's his
did.
name again?
Mac.
McTaggart.
I know they call him
something
Mac.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mac.
Right.
See, I always wanted him to have a beard, though. I'm not a big clean-shaven person. So, like, reading the first parts of it, I was just sort of like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, he wanted to take care of orphans and it was really great.
He had a heart of gold.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
I was strongly considering going to London, but I really liked where the whole friendship with Evangeline was going, and I was like, I want to hang out with her, so I stayed. But I wanted to go to the Scotsman. Maybe next time I read
Okay.
it. Yeah, I didn't. I went with Benedict.
All right.
Oh, that's cool.
I
that
went
we
Mr.
all-
Darcy.
Yeah.
It's just straight
Well-
Mr. Darcy the whole way.
Reading his profile, I loved that they really focused on the whole like witty repartee thing. It's like it's like, are you gonna be like his match in wits? And I was like, maybe.
Yeah.
Like I like that kind of sparked a whole like I'm gonna kick his butt now. Like I have to. But yeah, because like so you ended up with Benedict.
I did.
You ended up with Mac. My first go through, I ended up with Evangeline.
Yes, that was what I read in the
Yeah.
review that I read, was that you can actually end up with Evangeline, who is your like snarky fun
She's
friend.
so cool. Like as soon as
yeah.
as soon as she showed up, I was like, I'm going with you wherever.
You can like hang out in Egypt with her apparently.
Yeah, plus like on the cover you're on like the back of a horse with a woman. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's where I'm going. Not just
We'll
because
get
like not just because I thought the guys sucked, because I thought they were okay.
Yeah,
I
but that's
was-
interesting.
But it was like it was Egypt. That's what got me.
Yeah.
And I just love that Evangeline was like this scandalous woman.
Oh, she
Yeah.
was a strong character.
She was
She's
just
great.
amazing, and
yeah.
everyone was just like
Yeah.
slobbering all over her, and she just didn't care. She was
Yep.
like, "Well, I'm gonna go like be an Egyptologist," and like the only thing I didn't like, and I actually talked with another coworker who read this, who took a similar route and then changed. They kind of shoehorn in a romance with her and Evangeline. Like, and not that I'm saying that like two women can't, because I was totally an advocate of it, but it did feel like they kind of forced it to be like, well, you are with someone.
Yeah.
And like it just that was the only thing because it's like you literally go to Egypt, they get off the boat and they're like, while you were on the boat, you can't help but like notice Evangeline and like your feelings change, and it's just like they tell you how you're feeling. And
That's one of the problem with the whole second person plural thing, or the
Right.
second person thing, where it's the
Really
book
with-
is written as you,
Right.
Yes.
which is kind of like, well, I wouldn't do that, like when you're reading
Right.
it,
I know, right?
which is just like
Yeah.
inherently a problem with the style.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny because this really does harken back to the old choose your own adventure
Yeah.
books,
Right.
and that was an issue with those books as well. That ultimately they're taking a story through so many different paces that it becomes a little formulaic.
Oh, definitely. is a formula.
Nevertheless, though, it was a lot of fun. I thought, and I found myself wondering why there aren't more books like this written for an adult audience.
I know, yeah. I thought it was fun too.
And do you know,
Go ahead.
And I think one of the things that appeals to me is I love the notion of gamifying fiction and gamifying art, and this is subtly making a game out of a story. You know, it's giving you choices to follow through. It's like a video game, but the graphics aren't as good.
I mean,
It's a text game.
it's something that will get people reading, and it's just
Yeah.
I'm all for that. Like whatever it is that will make people like want to read a book or be interested in reading, like that's awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
I was honestly I went into this expecting not really to enjoy it, because I genuinely like romance novels and I read them like unironically.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, well, is this just going to be like making fun of me and the things
Yeah,
that
like
I
mocking
enjoy?
it?
And
No.
it doesn't really read like that.
Yeah.
I do think that you probably have to be in the right mindset to go into a book like this, because
Sure.
it is like it's like funny. It's
Yeah.
meant to be funny.
Yeah, it more
but-
mocks like the Austinian kind of
Yeah.
dynamic of like just people having like sharp things to say during a dance. Like you only get to have like one thing and then like you move on. And
You can definitely tell the author has read and enjoyed romances.
And loves
like
them.
yeah,
Sure,
exactly. Yeah, you can't mock something to this extent without truly enjoying it.
yeah, right. It's just like it's so playful and
Yeah.
and it's actually entertaining. Like going to Egypt, you get to meet up with a band of other like of women who are from all over the world who are kind of like assassins, and you get to go with them and kind of try to follow like Evangeline's story without giving too much away. Gets a little more complicated in Egypt, and you just get to meet up with these this band of women who's like they're just so cool, and you have a choice of staying with them too till like the end.
That's
And
really interesting.
that was my final ending, was staying with them.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
knew because I had read the review that was a possibility, and so I kind of like went into the Benedict story, and I was like, well, I mean, if something comes up, then I guess I might try and go to Egypt with Evangeline, but it's like I never saw it, so I don't know what turn I took that was incorrect.
Well, because
but
there was a huge mystery thing too. Like,
yeah,
when
that's what I
actually-
was focusing on.
Yeah, that was what was hard for me, because I saw that, because I thought she was really great at setting up like giving you a real choice instead of just being like, well, you can go here or go there. It's like, well, do you want to? It's like she baits you, and I really enjoyed that.
I was
too.
busy solving the mystery of Sir Lord Caddington
Yes.
and Benedict's birthright.
I
That's what I
know.
was focused on. So.
I love that they use the word slattern in there somewhere. I
Yeah,
think. It was
she has the
so
language
good,
down. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that this touches on, and it's maybe if we're going to be talking over the course of this year about a different genre every month, I think it's worth acknowledging that some of these tropes and things that we think of as being sometimes maybe a little too plain. This is how genres work.
Right.
This is why genres exist. I mean, it's
how they're sustained.
yeah, this is how they're
Yeah.
sustained. I mean, none of this. There's nothing too new under the sun. I'm afraid, But I think being able to play with the tropes in these in books in these kind of stories, it's just fun.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Well, because it gets to, we read like things that are comforting and that we kind of, not necessarily that we know, but they're satisfying in a way. And I think that's what a lot of, at least my impression of, especially something like romance, like there's something satisfying about seeing like two characters just sort of develop and seeing what they do, especially if they're really well done characters.
Sure.
And yeah, and that's something that I really wish I gave more credit to romance for. Just sort of, because like it's like I think we talked about this earlier. It crosses so many genres.
It does, yeah.
And it's hard to get away from. I mean, there's, what is it, like the Bechdel test or something, where it's like you pass it if like two women are talking about something other than like romance or a man or something, and or vice versa, something like that. And it's a really interesting thing, because I feel like I've always spent my whole reading career trying to break tropes, like finding things that I found fascinating because they take a cliche and then turn it successfully. Sometimes you just get the M. Night Shyamalan who are like, it's a twist, and you're like, okay, fine, like we didn't need this. But yeah, that's what I wish I'd, like, I still have some time too. It's pretty early in the month, but
Sure.
But yeah, like just in like the different genres and stuff too. Like it's just
There's a lot out there. There's a lot.
sci-fi is a big one, fantasy too. The big ones on that. And like I guess it's sort of like a romance layman. I wanted to ask someone with knowledge, because you have much knowledge on that. Like, what would you, so like, you said you were into regencies, which I actually hadn't heard that terminology, because I know of Harlequins, and my go-to is always making fun of like the whole, I think Brian and I were talking about this, the chic, like One Night with the Sheik.
A lot of
all
sheiks and those
yeah,
white,
like you were talking
white
about
harlequins.
the
Yeah.
titles and stuff. So
And enslaved by.
Yes.
There's
And I think
lot
that we
of
talked about
pregnancy,
this a
too.
little bit
Right.
last time, Brian, whenever we were discussing what we were going to be reading for the upcoming month. But that whole like enslaved by the sheik and like a victim of his passion and all of that,
Right.
all of that kind of stuff, that kind of comes back from like the beginning of the origins of the romance novel, where women, I mean, in earlier romance novels, there's a lot of rape. I mean, there's a lot of stuff
Right.
like that in there. And it's because you didn't want your female protagonist to be like to bring up the other slatternly. Like, you didn't want her to be like, oh yeah, take my honor and just ruin me for marriage. And that was a way to get around it. You still wanted the sexy scenes in the book, but you
Yes.
didn't want your female protagonist to go willingly.
Well,
And so that's why there's so much of that, and it still pervades in the white back Harlequins, because they're just like churn them out basically.
Right?
Well, I like that my character, me, in Of My Lady's Choosing, chose to go with Mac.
There you go.
So
And
wholesome.
to
So
exact-
wholesome.
It wasn't 100% wholesome, though. I'll tell you
Didn't he
what.
like save a child from a fire?
He was wholesome, but there were dewy.
No, shower scenes. Did she
Right,
like?
yeah.
Did she like put together a shower like it was an IKEA shower,
Yeah.
and somehow it's still showering.
Yeah. I
And
think,
she put like a bucket of water, but it rains for like 20 minutes.
I think that one of the things they turned into a sexy metaphor was the caper toss, which
Oh,
I think
There were a
is-
lot of
I
great
remember
metaphors.
that's too
I know
much.
there's
That
something with a
would be
horse
like,
stable too.
Yeah, one of my favorite, they have little sayings at the bottom of the page for whenever it's telling you to turn to whatever page to continue the story. And one of my favorites was, regardless, this is hot. Do you throw caution to the wind and fornicate? Turn to this page. Which is great. And then after I had done that, obviously, then the next one was, well, now you've gone and done it. Turn to this page, you wanton orgasmic harlot.
Yes, I love Wanton
So funny.
so much.
Really, really funny book. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of romance novels, unironically, and I mean, I enjoyed it. I think that there's a lot of good stuff in there for people who, obviously, you guys liked it, right?
It was
Even
fun.
though
Yeah, no,
Once I
absolutely
got
did.
started, it was good. Like just to sort of pique anyone else's interest, I won't give away any spoilers, but you can end up a werewolf.
I love it.
You can end up
I
a
love
werewolf.
it.
That's
Yeah,
great.
I was not expecting it.
No, I think
I was like,
I'm
oh,
not
okay,
turning
okay.
this. I'm not turning my copy. This isn't my copy. I can't
It's
remember.
my copy.
Yeah. I'm not turning my
Rubbing
copy
hands
in
on
yet.
that.
though.
Yeah,
It's okay.
That's
There's
another
actually a
great
lot of
thing
copies.
about
Although
it.
we have a lot of copies here at the
We
library.
do multiple ebooks
Yeah.
as well, and it's
Right,
very
we
easy to read in ebook
Push
form.
product people.
Definitely. Also, for talking about choose your own adventure, there's a really two notes on that. There's a really interesting flash game you can play on the PC called the Stanley Parable, where it's just
It's a fun game.
Oh, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
So many endings. Like it made me think about how much you have to think out these stories. And also, you can there's Shakespearean choose your own adventures. One's I think Chris North did them, something North. There's one for Hamlet, one for Romeo and Juliet, and like one of my friends I did like a quick skim of like the Hamlet one, and you can do like a play within a play within a play, and like all of this fun stuff too. Because it's like this where it's poking fun at it because it loves it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's coming from a nice warm place.
It
of,
comes from a
like,
place of love.
yeah, where you can make fun of yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
So, jumping ahead, Brian, what is our topic for next month's podcast?
Yeah.
Next month is going to be Sci-Fi Month.
Okay.
Woo!
So,
So I'm ready to roll on that one.
Heck
yeah,
man.
back in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. A little bit
Dude,
more.
yeah, that's like your welcome
right.
home.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun. But hey, stop by Northside this month and pick up our romance flyer. Pick up a special bookmark for yourself, and just talk with the staff. This is one of the things that I'm really trying to focus on this year with the Northside Reads 2019 program. Is that we want customers coming in and telling us what you like. This is what we're here for. And some of the most fun I get to have during my day is to get to hear what books people are passionate about, what we have on our shelves that they love, what we're missing on our shelves that they want.
Definitely.
A public library is. It's like My Lady's Choosing. It's an interactive thing,
Yeah.
and so we want to have you here to share some of these stories with us.
And it's a safe, non-judgmental place.
Oh yeah,
Like, I can't tell you how many people I have, women especially, that come in apologizing for what they're looking for, and it makes me so sad. Like, I actually just had a lady with a Kristen Feehan book.
yeah.
which I haven't read any of hers, but apparently she has a lot, and she does a lot of the like fantasy.
It's Christine Feehan?
Christine.
It's Christine. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Christine Feehan, and yeah, and it just is one of those things where I'm like, nah, man, like I
Read what you want.
read what you're reading.
Yeah.
It's a story.
That's what I'm saying. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah,
like,
I don't really care what it is. If you're reading, that's awesome.
And no one's gonna judge you, and if they do, let us know.
Yeah.
Because they suck. And yeah, and like if anything, you're gonna open like one of us up to something new too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
just
already
great.
happened once or twice this month.
Right?
I've some
Yeah.
things have found their way onto my reading list.
It's just so much fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Dude.
we will see you guys back next month, and we will be reading some sci-fi books. So thank you guys so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bah.